Hello, everybody, and welcome to video number 3. I have to keep checking what video I am because if I don't, then I forget to. Yeah, I send it to the person that's editing it, and they come back to me and they say, "Craig, what video is this?" So this video number 3, and we're going to be talking about the distribution of the great white shark. Now, the great white shark's distribution is pretty complex, actually. First of all, they are known as cosmopolitan animals, and they're also known primarily as inshore predators. Now, cosmopolitan means that you basically find great white sharks everywhere in the oceans. You find great white sharks in the Atlantic Ocean, the North Atlantic, the South Atlantic. You find them on the equator, you find them in the Indian Ocean, you find them in the Pacific Ocean, you find them in the Mediterranean Sea, Caribbean, everywhere. So great white sharks turn up in all sorts of different places around the world. But there are specific white shark abundant areas. Southern Africa is one such area. Australia is another white shark abundant area. California, in fact, both coasts of the United States, there is a white shark abundant area. Then down off Mexico, on the island Guadeloupe, at certain times of the year, it's a white shark abundant area. The southern part of New Zealand, right at the southern tip of the southern island, is a white shark abundant area. And the Mediterranean is also listed as a white shark abundant area, although I'm a little bit dubious about that. Now, white shark abundant area is a region where you can frequently find great white sharks, but within these white shark abundant areas are white shark sites. So let me use South Africa as an example. In South Africa, you don't find great white sharks teeming, along the entire coastline. For instance, you can just go out to sea in South Africa and you can start chumming in some area. Let's say you just go off and you go 10 kilometers offshore and you start chumming for sharks. The chances of finding a great white shark is pretty small. However, if you go 10 kilometers this way or 20 kilometers that way to a white shark site, then your chances of finding a great white shark is very, very good. Now, along our coastline, False Bay would be a white shark site. Then you'd move along and you'd get to Gansbaai, Dyer Island, and that is a white shark site. That's a seal colony close to shore. Then you'll go to Coin Point, and there's a seal colony there, and that is a white shark site. This is where white sharks come together and they group. Then you'll go to Straits Bay. Now there's no seal colony in Straits Bay, but it's a bay, and there's some large reefs. They call them the banks, 12-mile bank and the 6-mile bank, where a lot of game fish gather, and that is a white shark site. Then your next white shark site would be Mossel Bay, for instance. But between these sites, you obviously have white sharks cruising up and down. And then you go up to Algoa Bay, and that'll be another white shark site. And it's the same in Australia. There's certain areas, like the Neptune Islands, where white sharks congregate, and you can go there with a very high probability of finding a great white shark. Same in California. There's certain areas where the great white sharks congregate, such as the Farallon Islands in Northern California. The great white sharks congregate around those islands. So they're cosmopolitan animals in that you'll find them right up into Canada, right up into the northern latitudes, and then you'll find them all the way down to very close to the tip of South America, low latitude. So you find them in all areas. You find them right at the bottom of the South Island, not the North Island, right at the bottom of the South Island in New Zealand, where it's very, very cold. And I don't know the latitude down there, but it's very low latitudes. You find them off Tasmania. So that is where they become cosmopolitan. And as I say, they are primarily inshore predators. So most of the population you'll find close to shore along the continental shelf. Having said that, excuse me, having said that, great white sharks will readily swim hundreds of kilometers out to sea, easily. One day they'll be around a seal colony in Mossel Bay, which is a very famous seal colony. We actually call it Shark Island. And you'll have a shark around that island. And the next day, that shark could be 50 or 100 or 150 kilometers out to sea, right out to sea. Then you have white sharks that will literally cross oceans. There was one particular shark, a good friend of mine, Richard Pierce, has actually written a book on it called Nicole. And that shark was tagged by Michael Skoll, who used to work for me. And that shark traveled from Gansbaai all the way to Australia, to Queensland, and back in 6 months. And that was about a 3.8 meter great white shark. It had an archival satellite tag on it. So it swam 20,000 kilometers in 6 months. So the distribution is very wide. But talking about the distribution, people have this, this is more movement. People have this idea that they only swim near the surface. They don't. Great white sharks swim along the bottom, especially when they're young. They spend a lot of time on the bottom, hunting reef fish, skates, rays, small shark species, squid, cuttlefish. They spend a heck of a lot of time along the bottom when they're young, the juveniles. Then as they get larger, they start spending more time in midwater. And as they get older, they will go deep, they'll go shallow, they'll go midwater, they go wherever they want. They can dive down to depths of more than 1,000 meters easily. We don't even know how deep these animals go. But great white sharks have been recorded to dive down to at least 1,200 meters. So 1.2 kilometers at least down. So if they can dive down to 1.2 kilometers, there's no reason they can't dive down to 2 kilometers below the surface. So the distribution is very, very wide. As I mentioned in the beginning of this talk on distribution, you also find them in areas like the Caribbean. Now, what I want to explain to you, the difference between being cosmopolitan and actually having white shark abundant areas is this. In white shark abundant areas, if you go to the sites that I've explained to you, like a seal colony or a Pacific Bay, and you start baiting the water and chumming the water, you have a very, very good chance of finding a great white shark on any given day. Obviously, there are areas where they're seasonal and they move a little bit. For instance, in Mossel Bay, I'm just going to talk about Mossel Bay because that's a very well-known place. In the winter months, the great white sharks congregate around the seal colony and they're feeding on the seals. But then in the summer months, the great white sharks will move away from the seal colony and they'll move 10 or 15 or 20 kilometers up the coast and they'll start feeding on reef fish. And then they won't be feeding on seals. And that is their short home range. And they can even move further afield. But you'll find them when they're at the island during the winter months. That's a white shark site. You can go out there on any given day and you will have a 98% chance of finding great white sharks, if not a 100% chance of finding great white sharks. But as I say, they're cosmopolitan and they'll turn up in the Caribbean. They'll turn up in the Mediterranean, for instance. Now, I'm not saying that if you go into the Caribbean and you go out on your yacht or you go to one of the islands like St. Martin or the BVIs or the USVIs, wherever you may go on vacation, and you dive in the water, you're going to get attacked by a great white shark. But they do occur in the Caribbean. The difference is that there's no specific white shark site in the Caribbean. So even commercial fishermen that are out on the waters every single day in the Caribbean, let's say there's a fishing charter boat or a commercial fishing boat that leaves from St. Martin 280 days a year or 300 days a year. The person running the boat, the skipper running that boat, might do these fishing charter trips for 10 or 15 years or 20 years and never ever see a great white shark. Not once. And in the Mediterranean, although the Mediterranean is listed as a white shark abundant area, there are commercial fishermen that have been plowing those waters in the Mediterranean for decades, for 20 years, for 30 years, that have never seen a great white shark. But now you come to South Africa, and I doubt if there's one commercial fisherman that has not seen a great white shark, at least one great white shark. And in certain areas where they go fishing, the commercial fishermen consider the great white sharks a nuisance and a pest. And unfortunately, they sometimes kill the sharks because they catch them fish and the sharks come and take the fish off the lines. So that is their distribution. They are highly cosmopolitan animals, meaning they found in all areas of the oceans, deep water, shallow water. They're listed as inshore predators, and they congregate primarily in certain white shark abundant areas. And within these white shark abundant areas are specific white shark sites where you can easily find great white sharks. It doesn't mean that the oceans are teeming with these animals. It doesn't mean that they are an abundant species. Great white sharks are actually rare animals. If you know where to find them, you can find them in numbers. However, compared to all other species of shark, or many other species of shark, most other species of shark, the great white shark is a rare animal. It's not easily found. There are people that have been going out onto the oceans in certain parts of the world, and most parts of the world, for years and years and years, fishing, either sports fishing or just weekend anglers and commercial fishermen that have never seen a great white shark, although the great white sharks do occur in all areas of the oceans. So that is the distribution of the great white shark. Their movement is a different story. Not many people know. We don't know very much about their movement. We're only starting to learn about the complex movement of great white sharks. In the Pacific, there's some movement between Guadeloupe down in Mexico to Hawaii. I think they call it the Red Triangle or something like that. In South Africa, we know that the great white sharks move from False Bay, 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles, all the way up to at least Durban on our east coast, and they move up into Mozambique, and they move down again, and they move up the west coast, and they move down again. So we have a good idea of their movement. They are not resident animals. They are not territorial animals. And this is also about their distribution. So a lot of people believe that great white sharks are resident or territorial. So they get to a seal colony and they become territorial and they're resident there. And I've heard this many, many times. I've heard, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 times or even 100 times I've heard fishermen or people telling me that there's a certain spot where there's a great white shark and it's always there. The great white shark is resident. That's his area. That's his territory. That's not true. Great white sharks are not territorial in the slightest. And we proved this with our tagging work in the early 90s. I personally tagged about 500 great white sharks, and we determined very quickly that they were not at all territorial. They move into areas for a period of time, and then they'll move away. But this is something we're going to be discussing in another video, and that video includes involves, do they move together, do they hunt together, how do they move, etc., etc. And that is going to become a little bit more complex. But this video, I just wanted to tell you clearly that great white sharks are cosmopolitan animals. There's certain areas of abundance, and with these areas of abundance, there are certain white shark sites where white sharks are readily found. So that is what I've got to say about distribution. In the next video, we'll go deeper into it, into the great white shark's actual movement within these white shark abundant areas and between white shark abundant sites. So thank you for that, and video number 4 will be coming up.